out here.
Hi, my name is Carlos. I travel, I tattoo, and I take it all in. One country at a time, one tattoo at a time. Travel is what inspires me. Tattooing is what guides me. This is how I interpret the world. This is the global canvas.
Hello, hello, hello! Welcome back to another exciting episode of Carlos Tries to Figure This Thing Out. If you look at our canvas panel, you can see that something looks a little different today. Well, I was fully prepared to begin working on this arm. And give me 1 second, I'm gonna pause this. I gotta re-initiate my main camera here. One moment. You could see, if you look close, that I've been working on the arm, and we added the block in for the tattoos, and I was fully prepared to finish that today. However, something else struck me, different idea. And I started thinking, what if, let me bring my camera back, sorry you had to watch my belly while I dealt with that. I started thinking, what if we used some masking and we blocked off an area and tried to do what I could only describe as an overpainting, where we have the underpainting was done in like the first 2 layers, and then the subsequent painting that we've been doing this whole time was the painting. But I was like, what if we treated this like this was still part of a block-in layer, and then we painted over it for more detail. So that's what I'm going to give a shot today. I don't know if I'm going to like it, so I'm testing it just on this balcony here. Give me a second. Oops, sorry, I punched my microphone there. Give me a second, and I will adjust this one more time. I will zoom in for us, and then we'll move the panel a little bit so you can see better. Yeah, it's better there. So I figured we can give it a shot, and if I like it, then holy smokes, I'm gonna have to repaint the entire thing, right? But if I'm not too into it, then that's totally fine. We could just have a balcony that's got some extra definition on in the features. We're gonna have to come through this anyway and clean up these areas, but I don't know, man. I got this bug up my butt that said maybe, just maybe, we can go directly over it with direct painting methods instead of indirect. Indirect painting methods being layer over layer, and then the illusion starts to come to be through the layers affecting each other. Think of it like colored pieces of glass in a pile. But direct painting is just putting a brush stroke down, blending it into the next one, getting it done in one coat, one pass, a la prima, and then it's done. I've never enjoyed that style of painting. I'm not proficient in it, but I just got this idea of like maybe it would work for this. So you can see over here, I poured out just my warm tones, nothing cool yet. And I haven't poured out any of the neons from the light reflecting up there because I do want to have that orange and that pink light informing it. But I have some other ideas for how I want to use that reflective light in this painting, and we'll get to that in maybe the next video, probably the one after the next. But right now, let's give this a shot. Let's see if just jumping through and painting on top of this works, and if it does, awesome. And if it doesn't, oh well, you know, we gave it a shot. As always, today's sponsor is brought to you by water. Drink water, it's good for you. If at any point you feel like I'm lagging behind and I need a hydration break, you can just let me know and I'll take a sip. But without further ado, let's try to figure this out. So, I know for a fact that we're not going to get up to full black here because this is illuminated by the atmospheric light, but also by a little bit of these shiny lights here, and then the orange and the pink light that's coming this way. I've masked this off with the perspective that's pointing towards her heart. That's the dead center of the painting. All the perspective lines come to her heart. That's by design. But I digress. We're not going to get up to full black here. We might get to full black here, where it's obstructed from all of the light sources. So we'll save our black is black for that area, and I'll actually even start by putting a tiny dot of black right there, just so I can measure the values of everything else based off of that little black dot. So this is just straight lamp black right here. I'm sorry, straight ivory black. I'm just gonna pull a little bit out and just put a dot here. Y'all can see that? So, is my autofocus focusing? Okay, we're good. So yeah, so you can see that, that's the darkest dark. We're not gonna get that dark. So, really, if this is going through the colors of these like aged bronze, rusted type tones, we can just stick within these few here, and then maybe use this tone straight up for just some illumination area. But I'm going to go from darkest to lightest, starting with this corner and moving off in the distance, where we're going to lose a little bit of that richness and that definition because it's moving off and out of focus. But I'm going to start right up here with essentially a straight raw umber. There's still the tiniest bit of black left on my brush from that dot, which will behoove me to mix in with this because that'll give me just the slightest bit of darkness. But let's just drop this in and just see what we can do. I'd honestly rather be using a round brush for this, so let me switch out. Round brush being, can I do this best? This tip here, even though it's a big brush compared to this area, like this is me setting it right on the canvas, right? That is gigantic for the spot that we're trying to fill, but you'll see when I load it up with pigment, it comes to a nice fine point tip. And that's all we're using when we paint. We're just dancing off that tip. Right, so, see that? See how sharp that gets? So we'll just come in and just start dropping pigment here and see what happens. I'm not mixing through any liquid or any mixing medium right now, because I'm literally just experimenting with direct painting method. Just seeing if it works to just put paint on panel and call it a day. I'm gonna pull this pigment this way to create a 50% blend in the middle between the two of them. And then the trick will be, after we peel the tape off, do we have the effect that we're looking for? And if we do, I think we might be in business, and unfortunately that business is the business of going over a lot of the details of this painting again with another layer. If it doesn't look right, if it doesn't feel right, then we just won't do this. And like I was saying at the top, we could either just leave this little bit as is, or we can erase essentially everything that we do right now. But I'm optimistic. So what happened is I went down to the Detroit Institute of Arts this week with my 3-year-old and looked really closely at a lot of paintings that I liked, and there's this one in particular, I'm so sorry I forget the name of the artist, but it's a landscape painting of a town square that looks kind of like the Vatican or the Houses of Parliament or something like that. Lots of windows, lots of architecture, and everything is mathematically like perfect. And we got up really, really close to the canvas, as close as they allow you to get, and saw that there are clear lines where they used some kind of masking. I'm sure they didn't have hobby tape back then, but they had some kind of masking, right? And I was like, now I understand how you can drop such precise brush strokes. So it inspired me to give this a shot. And truth be told, I always knew that we were going to have to redo these balconies anyway, because we lost a lot of it in some subsequent layers. Pull these out here, make a 50-50 of these two. However, I didn't anticipate doing it as like a repaint in a different style, different approach. I mean, the word style, as far as like a applied artist, it's interchangeable with what I'm saying, but a lot of time when people think style, they'll think like, oh, you're gonna do it like an impressionist, or you're gonna do it like a French romantic, or you're gonna do it like a surrealist. No, I just mean style of using my brushes and using my pigment and layering the pigment to create the effects we're going for. I can't imagine there's going to be too much more than just this first layer, and then we're going to peel back and see what it looks like. Because right now there's not going to be much texture on these guys. If any, to be honest. This might just be a flat piece of metal. And it's getting warmer as it comes this way because the orange light is shining up here, so it's affecting us. However, you can see on my palette I don't have any bright orange. However, this is going to lend a considerable amount of warmth to this metal because it's getting warmer, it's getting more orangey. Anyway, hope you guys are doing good. Happy Halloween, by the way. I should have worn a costume for the stream. I feel like a chump. You know how it looks like I keep looking up to check a reference? I don't have any reference photo to look at. I'm literally looking at my stream to make sure that my cameras are working good and that the effects are translating of what I'm putting on the panel. I don't know yet how long I'm going to be painting for today, but we'll find out as a team. All right, so I think the first thing we should do before we peel this tape is just make sure that I'm fully saturated up to the lines of the tape, so when I peel it off, there's not any like wonkiness. So I'm gonna get a little laser focused here, little eagle eyes going, just to check and make sure that everything is saturated, and then we can peel this tape while it's still wet. That's very important. And then we'll see how it looks. And if it looks good, maybe we'll mask off the next one, this time as a team, and see how that goes. All right, let's pull this tape off and see what we came up with. If this was, yes or no, a good idea or not. Let's see. Just make sure I got all 4 pieces here before I pull, because I want it to come off in one smooth pull here. Man, I don't know. That's pretty satisfying. That blend. I can see where from the previous layer we need to pull those background colors down to obstruct that little dark line right there, because that was out of the perspective. But oh man, I think I like this. This is gonna be it's gonna be annoying, man, if I gotta find myself repainting so much of this painting just to get those like smooth transitions. But that's okay. Said from day one, the whole point of this project is to make this as difficult as possible on me, because I'm trying to relearn an ancient craft, and a craft that I was once pretty proficient in. It's definitely gonna be too bright. All right, let's try this. Tiny little brushes just dancing off the tip. When I went to the museum this week, I was specifically looking for one painting by an artist named Jan van Eyck. It was St. Jerome in his study. And the painting is smaller than what we're doing right now, and far more detailed than what we're doing right now. This is an 8x10 that we're working on, believe it or not. And his painting was a 5x7, so not much bigger than a postcard. And it had a lot more detail in it. And I remember the painting just from enjoying the museum and seeing it many times, you know? So I had other things to do. We were shopping for my wife's birthday presents. But I was like, let's run down to the museum really quick just so I can find that painting, take a picture of it, and I'll be able to have it as inspiration for this project that I'm working on YouTube. And we looked and looked and looked and looked, and I couldn't find it, and my poor 3-year-old was getting bored. She was a great sport about it, but she was like really getting like antsy, like, can we get going? So out of frustration, in the museum, I opened up the museum's website to try to find where it's at. You know, if you're like at a Home Depot or something and you're trying to find something, you just don't know where it is, and then you pull it up and it says aisle A23. Oh, and then you find it immediately. It was like that, and I pulled it up, and it turns out that it's not even on display right now. So I think it's probably on loan somewhere, which is incredibly common for art to be passed around from museum to museum. Or it could be in restoration currently. That happens as well. So who knows? Now, we have an area here, this little chunkiness. This perspective it's the front facade of this balcony, like the fascia. Like you have your area that you stand in, and you just have this front-facing panel. That's what we're looking at right here. So that would make me think, let me find a brush with no pigment on it so I can use it as a pointer. That would make me think that in this corner here, if that is where the corner hits there, then the corner of the fascia on the other side, which we're now looking underneath through to, would just come straight. So I would have to clean up this little smudginess here. So if I obstruct it all with a paintbrush right now, you can see how it would look more realistic if it came straight back to the wall, but we got this big chunk out here. So in order to fix that, I'm gonna have to mix up that purpley tone and pull that over. And currently I don't have that on my palette, so I'm going to pour that out right now. For me, I use a pigment called Plum Gray. Hold up the camera there. It's from Utrecht. It's a pretty inexpensive tone, but it is providing any of the violets or the blends that require violet on this piece that we're working on. I took a oil painting course, and let me start that over. I took a continuing education college course in oil painting, but I've done tons of workshops. I don't know why in my brain I'm not associating like a 4-day workshop as though as an art class. It totally is. It didn't require me enrolling in a college or anything, but dude, I've spent so much money traveling for art class. That's so weird. That was like a Freudian moment where I just didn't consider all my workshop studies as class. But anyway, in the one oil painting continuing education community college class I took, they threw out this concept of when in doubt, use violet. And the violet's working because it's part of our background. It just is, you know. But in general, if you're having trouble coming up with a color and trying to figure out what to do, if you're having trouble, neutralizing a tone, to try to figure out what direction you need to, warm or cool, but like just use violet. Dip into some violet and you'll probably get your answer pretty quick. Well, that's a lot brighter than it needs to be. So essentially we're just going to carve out, wow, that's a lot brighter. How can I dull this down with my current palette? I will jump into, I guess, the tiny bit of raw umber. Yeah, that'll neutralize it a little bit deeper. Yeah, it's better. So I'm basically just going to come straight across here, and I should probably do this with a little bit more tact, eh? Just try to carve that out and make it a little bit straighter, and then we can blend it into our background from there. I feel like it's listing downwards. No, it looks good. And then we'll just pull this down and blend it in. This does have, the background has more of a bluish hue to it, but once we buff this into the other adjacent tones, it'll be impossible to really tell. What else was I talking about here? One of the other issues, though, is as this moves backwards in space, this line needs to get softer and more diffused. It can't be as sharp as this because we want to see that photographic effect. So after I get these tones in here, I'm also going to pour out some French ultramarine blue because it looks like I need it to blend into that backdrop up there, and maybe even some phthalo green. I wasn't really planning on pouring out my cool tones for this because I wanted to just use the warm tones on the wrought iron. That's all right. That's why we're here. That's why we got this paint, to use it. So anyway, as I was saying, once I put the adjacent tones down, that purpley backdrop, I will be able to use a soft blending brush to diffuse the edges of that wrought iron and connect it with the background better, and also make the edges look a little bit more photographic. All right, so bring this down in here, bring this down in here. We're gonna mix up a tone that's a little bit more turquoisey. You see that? Like how this backdrop is. Or how this background is, I should say. don't really know what Halloween's gonna be like tonight. Seems like every year we have less and less trick-or-treaters. So I don't know if that's gonna happen tonight or if we'll be surprised with like a new crop of kids. What a crop. Look at that crop. Oh yeah. So I'm blending this into this tone, but also at the same time my brush is slightly obliterating this edge and making it a little bit softer on the wrought iron. Unintentional, just a little bit of sloppy brush work, but I realized that it's going to be a nice move to blend these out to soften up that edge, so that is cool. Alright, so now I still have to do these uprights, but I want to do the fascia frame of this entire balcony before I do anything else on it, just to make sure that this is the move and this is what I want to do with the painting. Okay, let me find some kind of nice little blender and we'll try to obliterate some of the lines here. Try to soften up the edge so it feels a little bit more photographic. Just pulling them through there. Going light pressure and going with, I'm not going up and down to blend these two tones into each other. I'm running along the seam and just letting the bristles do the work for me. The one with the little scrubbing bubbles, they do the work so you don't have to. These bristles work for me. Alright, I don't like how it rounded off this edge here, so I'm gonna have to fix that. And luckily, I still have my pigment on my brushes, so we're good to go there. Sharpen that one. Let me sharpen this one. And we're good to go. Nice. Okay. So now the question is, are we able to mask off and do this part of... Yeah, I need to. Whether we can or not, because this paint is wet and I really don't want to drop tape on it right now because it'll just kind of smudge what's already there, but we got to figure out a way how to get that. So let me do a couple creative pieces of masking here. Like I said, I'm using this hobby tape. It's got a real Saturn's rings thin edge thing going on here. So I can use that to mask off a couple lines, and then if I'm really careful, I can do this without smudging the rest of the previous brush strokes. So let's see if I can get away with that. Okay. Make sure we're good there. All right, so that gives me that top line. Pulling this back line, that'll be no problem. That's an easy one. The tricky one is where it touches this pigment here, right? So gotta figure out how to do that without messing up what's there. I think what I will do is just try to use a piece and butt it up against it. And if that works, cool, and if it doesn't, that's fine. I'm gonna use a piece of Jizo Pete's. I'm gonna use some scissors to cut off a piece. Get a really sharp edge on here. It's supposed to be getting tattooed right now. I was talking with my tattooer last night and explaining that I become a big whiny baby whenever I'm like sick, and oftentimes when I get tattooed and I come home after, I just fall into like the bed and just lay there and slouch and pout and need my crying time. So I don't want to do all that tonight because it's Halloween. I don't want to mess up Halloween for everybody else. So I'm hanging out here. I'm live streaming here instead. How's that sound? Just putting some pressure on the back end here so I can straighten this out. It's like using tools for minor surgery. That's not. Calm down, Carlos. You're not a doctor. Okay, just get this edge there, and then the rest of it I can just sharpen up manually. Okay. Okay, sweet. So this part of the wrought iron, the balcony, this fascia that's forward facing towards the camera here is gonna be mostly black. It'll be affected a little bit by the ambient light coming from, let's see if we can get this without messing up. Coming from that lamp right there, but not too much, because that lamp is pointing down and it's not really lighting up what's going on above it. So I think I'm just gonna focus on dark tones. And actually, I have a good plan here. So if I go solid black, like that dot that we started with, on this corner, and then faded a tone that gets slightly lighter as it comes towards that light, we might get a nice realistic effect. So let's start with this straight ivory black. A sharp straight edge, and then we'll move away from it as to not blur it any more than it needs to be. Okay. Now there's a good amount of implied texture in this painting, meaning that like the texture of the brick, the texture of some of like the metal on here, just from the way that the brush strokes went down with those indirect layering painting methods, it implies some kind of texture, but it's not like directly painted, right? It's a more abstract approach, and it's a lot more abstract of a result, meaning that, like, you know, it wasn't necessarily controlled. So in what we're doing now, if I were to mask off the entire painting and just do these like gradients, it would look weird, like a little like sci-fi cubist-y, and then we'd have to add texture over it to make it feel more realistic. We're gonna lose some of that by overpainting this new layer atop of what we did before, but we can always add new texture to it, and that feels a little bit more genuine because we'll have to make decisions of where the divots or pits or scratches or whatever go, whereas before it was just kind of implied with the sloppiness of the brushstroke. So if part of our goal is to not be a sloppy painter, then we kind of want to be making real decisions. Great directors don't just let it figure it out on camera and then show like, hey, this is my movie, right? Every single frame every decision has been thought out before they say action. So if that's how we fancy ourselves, then we would need to do another layer over this whole overpaint. Just of textures. So if we need to, we need to. If not, no biggie. But we're gonna see how this goes. We're gonna paint this balcony masked off and see if we like it. And if we do, then we're in trouble because we're gonna have to mask off a lot of stuff and re-overpaint a lot of stuff. But if not, then that's fine too. Just making a 50% now between the ivory black and this raw umber, just to make sure this transition is nice and smooth. Again, this can warm up as it gets close to this light because the light would make it warmer. I don't want it to be too light though, because this is above that lamp, right? So I don't really want it to look like it's shining on this edge. If I did, this tone would be so much brighter. It'd be scorching bright because it would be directly affected by this lamp. Something else that I can't and won't do is have like a white highlight on this edge from the light hitting, because the white highlight is literally a specular highlight. Whenever you see that white dot on the eye or any of these like bright, sharp highlights, kind of like this one down here, what you're seeing is a reflection of the light itself. This lamp, it's pointing downwards, and the sconce around the bulb is preventing that bulb from being seen on that edge. So it wouldn't be a bright white reflection, because you can't actually see the bulb on there. Just a tiny Painting's a bit darker where it touches the wall to create a little bit of a shadow where it connects. And then we'll peel this tape and see how this blend looks. And then also I can zoom out and show you the full painting so we can tell if in the context of this painting if it makes sense to continue this method of direct painting. A lot of the artists that we know and love were using direct painting methods. Some were layering, of course, but a lot of them were just putting down a stroke and blending in into the next one, including some people I respect tremendously. So if this becomes part of the new process, then that's fine. It just seems tedious. All right, so here we have these two edges of the balcony. Let me reposition our painting. Let's zoom out and see this as a whole. Let's see if we like it. Come back a little bit more. Let's go there. Okay, what do we think? I think it's pretty rad. I mean, because nothing else around it is like that right now, it's a little stark. I feel like the corner is a little too differentiated within those tones, so maybe we should just obliterate that edge a little bit and see how it feels after that. See if we enjoy it a little bit better. I do like that it's more readable, absolutely. Do I like that it's so in focus compared to what's in the foreground? Not really. I like the amount of focus we lose as we go backwards, and we did make those decisions as we were painting this, so maybe sharpening or over-painting everything would be a poor idea, but some might be a good idea. So we could be selective with this, because I don't want to undo a lot of the important decision making that went into those first, like the foundational layers of painting. Feels a little bit better. It also has a weird optical illusion though, right? If you imagine this is like an interior bend of a different shape, it's like, whoa, it's tripping me out. But that's okay. We can add texture out here that won't exist back there, and it'll, because we're moving further away from the camera, and that'll solve that issue. So let's do it right now. Let's do wet and wet texture. I would say some pitted marks. I don't want it to get too much brighter than what it is already over here, because we don't need it, again, to be that reflective. So if I grab this tone and just texture it through here, I think we will have a cool effect. What I'm doing right now is I'm using a brush that was uncleaned, that still had this, so like the bristles are still like stuck together. Let's see if I can show you this in my camera if it'll focus. Right? So I can't get a clean brush stroke because they're still glued together, right? But if I take this and go straight down and start stamping, look at that, I get a lot of control over what gets deposited onto the canvas. So let's start there and see if we like any of this. Unfortunately, I have to hold a straight down angle, and let me zoom back in for you guys too. I'm also going to mute my camera so you don't have to stare at my belly every time I stand up to make an adjustment here. A little bit better. Let's see if I can get focus on there or not. Maybe if I put something next to it, it'll focus better. Dime for scale. Alright, it's about the best focus I'll get, and I think it's actually pretty darn good. Alright, so let me start punching in some texture in here. We'll see if we like it or not. Trying to go for like a little bit of a knurled steel. Something that's got like some bump to it. You know, like it's not necessarily a slick piece. Oops, I forgot to bring myself back. I'm sorry. You can see my shining, beautiful face. Alright, there. So yeah, anyway, so it's not just like a slick piece of metal. It has some kind of texture to it. We'll see if we like that. And this could theoretically undo some of the work that we just did by adding the new layer, but we'll see. We shall see. As things go into their shadow, they lose definition. So I'm okay if the texture disappears into the shadow a little bit and then picks back up over there. However, we might want to have a couple of brighter spots that eke out from that shadow that are receiving some kind of light. So let's pick up a little bit of a lighter tone. It might be too much. Let's tone it down and try again. If you're still in school and in like an applied art class or whatnot, you can impress your teacher by using the phrase indirect painting methods versus direct painting methods. See if they pick up on that. Man, where'd you learn that? There's a lot of books I read to figure out how to do this stuff. It's not like it just comes naturally. Some of it does, but it's not like it all just comes naturally. So I would say check out Juliet Aristide's Classical Painting Atelier. It's a great book. James Gurney, Color and Light, fantastic, really important book for most artists in any kind of visual art, like tattooing or painting or even filmmaking. Color and Light by James Gurney will show you a lot of how light is supposed to behave in different scenarios. It gives you a couple of rules of thumb that you can lean on when you're confused as to how to pull off a specific lighting effect. If I'm trying to remember one off the top of my head, and I'll probably mess it up, but there's this thing of like, if you're trying to paint something underwater, say you're doing a scene of a submarine that's coming upon a shipwreck. If the submarine was above water, and it was painted like an army green with, let's say, cherry red stripes. If you're underwater, the sunlight is not getting all the way down there, right? So it's not going to illuminate the same way that it would be if you're above water. So if you're trying to figure out how much to desaturate the red and the green tones, or how much texture you should put in there, how much focus on the edges, there's this formula that if you were standing, let's do it like this. This is a good way to show it off. So there's this formula, if you're standing right here on land and you look 50 yards this way at that same submarine, the amount of texture, definition, warmth to color that you lose by being 50 yards away is the exact same that you would being 50 yards underwater. So if you want to measure the focus that you'd be able to capture and the texture and the colors on that submarine at a depth of, let's say, 10,000 feet, you would have to imagine if that submarine was 10,000 feet away from you, straight forward in a fully lit day, how much you could get away with, how much you could see, and then that's what you replicate for underwater. And that's the type of like little rules and suggestions that James Gurney came up with in Color and Light that are just phenomenal. That's a very specific one, but you know, we might end up using some of it here. We used it definitely for the glowing of these neon lights, but it could be like what's going on inside the room where this window is right here. You know, what's going on back here and how does that light come out this way to affect this area. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, so I got some texture reintroduced into here, and yes, it does feel a little bit more reminiscent of the previous layer before we just had like a smooth gradient on here. But do we know if that's a good thing or a bad thing yet? Not sure. So let's continue to add some texture here. And like I said, we're gonna lose it as it goes back because it'll be out of focus. So we're gonna have some depth of field effect there. But I'll start with the texture close to the camera that we can see. And just kind of dissipate it as it goes back, and then also after we drop in these new dots, we'll soft blend it as it goes back to further remove any readability that might be there. I hate this little wobble on the black there, but I can fix that after I'm done doing this part. Okay. See, it's depending on the light the camera's picking up. You can see a little bit of the actual textures there. Okay, so we got that in. Let me soften up some of it where it gets into shadow and where it moves away from the camera. I'm just pushing paint into paint physically from the outer layer to the inner, just smashing through each other. Okay, so now we have a little bit more controlled texture in there. I will clean up that bottom black line. I guess I can just add instead of subtract on this one. So let me just really quickly tighten this up. All right, that's better. Not perfect, but better. And done is better than perfect, right? That's a rule. Okay, so now let me zoom my camera back out and we can look at this in the context. I'm gonna go ahead and mute this really quick, my belly, so I don't. All right, I will check out my chat in just a second, Cadet. I think that was you. Come back up here. I'm out of here. And just a little bit more. And then I'll bring myself back into the fold here. What's up, Cadet? Can't stay for long, but I haven't been to a stream in like a week, so hi, how are you? How was your trip? Your bats and your merch and all that stuff. Now stream is covering my face, so I'm gonna go ahead and move myself here. Bye. Right. Myself down here. Okay, so if you're just joining us, what we're doing is we're repainting some areas on top of what we already did to add some texture and maybe some more believability to see if we like it. And if we like it, then we'll go over a lot of this painting with another layer. Tie it all together. So I don't know. I might have to sleep on it because right now, again, like I said, the starkness of it is a little jarring to see. I still have to do the cross beams though, the support structure. So let's work on that. I'm gonna keep the camera zoomed out for right now. There's no need to get silly close up with this. And I wish I had just like a little button I could click here that could just zoom me in, zoom me out. When I do get my new super fancy camera, I'll have the lens here and I can just chuck it in and out and that'll be a lot faster. But that comes later when I can afford it. I do want this support beam to, instead of connecting to this edge, connect it to the interior of this. So that's going to be a much different angle that it's going to come down on. So let's start it from like that. Another fact about Jan van Eyck and the like micro-realist painters of the 1400s is they had time, right? They weren't doing 1 hour streams. They weren't trying to show off painting technique or like, you know, anything like that. So they might as well have put in that gradient and then left it to sit for a week and then come back and then put in texture and then let that sit. So who's to say? I wasn't there. I'm sure there's a book I can read and I will research it and get back to you that has that answer. Okay, right now I'm going to put in a new support beam here. Almost like we're putting a wire shelf up on the wall for IKEA. Ugh. And this connects to the wall on this angle directly where this vertical is here, which using some masking tape will help, but I will just use a paintbrush really quick to measure how far down that should come to make the vertical connect there. So it's basically like there. Which feels kind of far. But this is just math, folks. I'm wondering if, so when I'm doing the math of this and I'm bringing that connecting post from the interior corner underneath here straight back to hit the wall where this would come down, it puts this point of connection right here by these bricks, which are only, as we measure here, about 16 inches away from this doorway, which means if this character were to walk 16 inches back that way, could they fit on this balcony? Likely not, because they're still going to be like, maybe their feet would be that wide, right? So that's like a tiny balcony you got to shuffle up against the wall. So in order to save the mathematics without repainting the whole painting, what I would have to do for that is bring this back in this way, which could then put this strut back here, and that would almost double the amount of perceived space that's here based off of the measurements that we know locally are over here. So that's going to be the best route. So fortunately, unfortunately, right? We're painting. We're just figuring out. I'm going to buff out from here up and then back down this way to remove that, and that'll give us a little bit better, more believable perspective. These are the decisions you make when you paint. So all I'm doing is just taking a rag, just an old t-shirt, old white t-shirt, lint free. I'm just going to buff out some shape. Look at that. Just push that away from the wall. I'll have to add some more brick texture back there, of course, but at least that pushes away from the wall a little bit. And then I can move that, come straight down there. And now it feels like it's further away a little bit, but it's further away. So that solves some of that mathematical issue. So now that puts this as the final connecting point with the wall. I'll have to replace these balustrades, but start by putting a straight line there, and that means that this connects right there, so we're good with that. So now I can come straight down through all there to connect that, and we have ourselves a shelf, essentially. So now all this stuff here, that's clearly the remnants of the before, we'll have to buff that out by adding more of these brick type tones. So we'll come up here, we'll mix up a little pile of something that's similar and closer to that. And this is really going to be like some ochre and some raw umber to match that tone that's already underneath there. I think if I drop that right there right now, it doesn't look terrible. It's very close. It needs to get desaturated just a little bit more. But I can essentially flood the whole area with this tone now, and then add the requisite textures to match what's on the rest of this wall. Looks like it also has a little bit of orangishness to it, a little bit of an orangey look, so drop that in. I'm gonna mod it down, which means just kind of like stamping it in here to give it a similar amount of messiness as the rest of the layer that's there. I am gonna have to remeasure the part here that connects to the wall to make sure that the perspective of that rectangle is correct. But that is not a problem. Don't mind it at all. So it's already feeling further away from the camera, eh? I like it. I like it. So if I want to continue that brick pattern up, I don't really need to. I can actually let this kind of set up and just pull some shadow back in from that upper corner. Maybe I'll just do that. Will save us all some time. Plus, this door disappears into darkness up there anyway, so I think that's honestly, that's the move. Let's see if I can just brush in a little bit of dark glaze right now and call it. You know, I could be done with that corner. Yeah, cheesing my way out a little bit, but it works. So by putting some masking tape down now and trying to remeasure these distances here, it might not be the time for that because this is a lot of wet paint. But what I need to figure out is how far back this balcony goes to how far out it comes here to make this width now make sense down here, which would mean cropping out a good amount on that end too. Let me obstruct it. Paintbrush really quick. So if I just obstruct that and we just stare at how this disappears back into space, there's definitely some geometry that's incorrect here. So we'll have to suss that out. But I'm going to let that layer dry first before trying to alter the shape any further. Now when it was like this, and it like when this side was as blurred out as over here, none of this mattered because we were able to lose it in that messiness. And your brain connects the dots. It's just looking at our ballerina. It's thinking, oh yeah, balcony goes back there. Got it. No big deal. Fades away into the depth of field. But now, if we're making some more direct decisions, we're going to have to tune these edges the right way, right? So that whole corner edge here, all this stuff needs to be just as blurry as this edge running the vertical of the end of the alleyway, where that violet comes into this rust tone. It needs to be the same amount of diffused to make sense. It can't be any sharper than this. So to give you a for instance, if I just straight up blur this out, it makes a little bit more sense. That makes a lot more sense actually, to be honest. Haze looks nice too. So anyway, did that solve the issue of the mathematics, of the geometry of this being off? Probably not. I mean, honestly, I could probably lose that last balustrade entirely, the one that's coming out there, and just go straight up vertical from there. Let's do that. I know I'm just making these decisions and then just jumping in without really explaining what I'm doing, but that's just how narrating these things go. So I will take this tone that we mixed up earlier and completely eradicate that balustrade right there. And then also, while I have it out, I'll come straight down, I'll just chunk off that. Mathematics already look better on that rectangle. Still feels like it's kind of a scrunchy balcony, but I've experienced some of those. I don't want to use excuses to get out of being a decent painter, but I've been on balconies like that before, especially New York City. It seems like it's a pretty realistic place for it to be like that. But now that I put that down, where's that blending brush? Blend this out entirely too. I don't know about this whole overpainting method. I think it's a good experiment, and I know that the area of proficiency that I have is not in direct painting methods. It's definitely in indirect painting methods. The next painting I'm going to be doing will have glazing in it, but it's a lot more direct. It's a different style. I already have it figured out. I know once we finish this painting what the next one is going to be, so that's exciting, but we got to finish one before we go to the next. So unfortunately, I can't give you any hints on that. But back to the truth of the matter, I'm not the most proficient in indirect painting or in direct painting methods, which is just putting a stroke down and moving on. I've said that a million times. But I'm going to do it next time because I want to make this as difficult as possible for myself. You know, I also want to try new things all the time. Because who knows? Like, if you don't try, if you don't experiment, you might not realize exactly what you're missing, and you might be missing something huge. So now that I brought this straight back to the wall here, I can see exactly how far down this is coming that we needed to get rid of, and then it shows me that all of that shape in there that was the back fascia is actually incorrect, and it needs to come to that section. So I need to bring this brick texture up and into there to shape that out a little bit better. And these are all just things we're figuring out as we go, right? Keep that nice and dark under there. Did I have a brush for that already? I did not, so I'll just re-dip in these piles here. And this is more of my like rusty brick tone here. It's a little bit bright, yeah. Saturate a little bit by dipping down in here. We just want a straight line from that corner to that corner. I should have paid attention in math. I never really did. So here we are. That's okay. We're figuring it out, right? Closer. Definitely closer. Not 100% there, but definitely closer. I feel like eating garbage food today. I have a few, another week before my physical comes up, and once I learn exactly how much cholesterol is in my body, I can then start to eat better meals. But right now I'm just gonna pretend like ignorance is bliss. I'm gonna eat some garbage food after this. After all, it's Halloween. What does that even mean? So I do like the warmth that this is receiving from this light glowing and lighting that up. There's no pink in there, so maybe I can transition a little bit of that into there by pulling a little bit of violet. I'm hesitant. I'm going to try this. I'm hesitant to pull out my my full chromatic violet that we used in mixing those paint tones. But if I just dab a little bit, just barely blend it in, then it may work out. So let's see, what do I need to finish before I start doing that? I need to finish straightening out this edge back here. Okay, if it blurs on the edge, because that's kind of what we want. So there's this there. And just kind of apply pressure to haze out. Oh yeah, that's feeling way better now. I still got to get the underneath part here with this violet tone, so let me do that. That's good. Good stuff. Now I'll just push those into each other to blend that out. Sweet. Awesome. Almost done here. What was I gonna do? Oh, I was gonna add just a tiny bit of a violet glow here from this lamp shining over here. This will be my classic end of stream decision that I may regret. Let's see. This does happen with me sometimes. Where I go, oh, I got a quick idea to cap it off, and then I do it, and I'm like, I hate all of this. So if I put this tone in there right now, it's going to be bright, scorching pink, right? We don't want to do that, but I do need to have the highlight, the midtone, and the dark of this mixed up so I can accurately assess if this hue is correct. So I'm going to build this gradient and then just dip in the tone that needs to blend into here. Make sense? Makes sense. All right, let's see if I'm out of my mind or if this works. Not out of my mind. Works pretty nice. And I think that's all that needs. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for swinging by. I look forward to doing some more streaming, probably pretty soon, to be honest. I know that we didn't make much progress, but slow progress is progress, and the hours that we put in are always worth it. So thanks for following. If you haven't already, if you like the video, give it a like. If you like the channel, give us a subscribe. If you want to set up notifications, you can drop into our live chat here and try to keep me distracted while we're painting. But apart from that, I'll see you later.